Thank you for joining us for this episode of Leading Change. My name is Emma, and I have Dia with me today, and we're going to be talking about the 4 types of really ways to ask stuff. But before I dive into all the questions that I've got for you, can you give everybody a real quick introduction?
Hi, everybody. I'm Dia Bondi, longtime leadership communications coach, long time, over 20 years, helping VC-backed founders and senior leaders in organizations really develop a strong leadership voice so they can secure the decisions and resources they need to move their businesses and initiatives forward. And I am the author of a wild book called Ask Like an Auctioneer, How to Ask for More and Get It, which I wrote as an outcome of everything I learned from my impact hobby of fundraising auctioneering for women-led nonprofits and nonprofits benefiting women and girls. So that was my mouthful.
Well, and that you gave me the perfect segue back from what I just teased in the intro to talking a little bit about what's in the book and what you've learned there. Can you share with everybody what are the 4 types of asks, and then how does this relate back to, as you phrased it, your hobby?
Yeah, my impact hobby. Yeah.
Of helping people raise money.
So the 4 types of asks I think about are ones that help folks get where they're wanting to go. Because we recognize that when I say we're asking, we make asks that secure both resources and decisions that help advance us. And when we think about negotiation or making asks, we really often think about money, and that is one of them. After I wrote the book, Ask Like an Auctioneer, I looked out across all of my client experience and realized, oh my gosh, every ask I've helped somebody put together, whether an executive or, an individual contributor on one of my workshops or a founder I'm working with, could fall into one of these 4 categories. Actually, I was reflecting on it. It hit me so hard when I was on a mountain biking day with my husband. I made him pull over so I could write them down. And they're in the book, but they are, first, of course, money, anything to do with money and, the dollars and cents that can help you get there, whether it's asking for a discount, asking for investment, asking for a contribution, as a nonprofit leader, asking for a donation. So money is pretty obvious and direct. And then the second one is really about authority. These are the places where we are more in charge of decisions. We own decisions. So these comes in the forms of official promotions, new titles, but they could also be about how you have authority over your time, over a particular domain inside of a team where you have both decision-making power and or power to be in an influential position. So we're talking about decision-making power or authority, places where you can be the author of your own future. And then the third category is about asks that grow your influence. And this isn't about being an influencer, but can grow your influence by doing things like getting access to networks that you otherwise wouldn't have access to growing your visibility with the cohorts of audience folks that you really want to establish and or deepen relationship with. That means, asks that maybe mean that you speak at your organization's all hands for the first time so that people can put a face to a name. It could be about getting on stage in front of the audiences that matter if you're growing your thought leadership in a space or wanting to expose yourself to a new group of folks who can help collaborate with you to get you where you're wanting to go. So that's about growing influence. Could be about securing mentorship from somebody or sponsorship from somebody. And then the fourth one is what I call balance, but I'm not thinking about work-life balance. I'm thinking about all the asks I've heard folks name that are about bringing into balance what we're doing and who we are. This is where we're making pivots in our careers. This is the kinds of asks that shift maybe our client portfolio to have more of the kinds of clients we want, a few of the ones we don't. It's about bringing, into balance, or you can think of into alignment, how we navigate our day every day or our week or our month or our year in a way that is aligned to who we actually are. So those are the 4 ask categories. So when I think about asking as a success strategy, and people sometimes when they hear about what it means to ask like an auctioneer, they say oh my gosh, I love that. I want to ask like an auctioneer, but I just finished my performance review, or I just got a promotion, or I'm not going into a funding round. And what I'll say to that is, how might more money, more influence, more authority, or more balance, serve the goals that you have right now? And then what could you ask for that gets you more of any one or more of those four things? And I tell you what, we can come up with asks that do exactly that.
I think that the authority and influence ones are interesting to me because, like you said, your mind immediately goes to when you're asking to kind of like the money direction.
Yep.
But having moved through that process of being able to get a mic in your hand or be set up as like that authority at a meeting or those types of things, you do have to ask for those. And sometimes we think of that more as like earned as opposed to necessarily needing to go through that process of asking. So I think that that's a really important piece to like bring light to, because if you want those things, you have to ask for them.
Absolutely. And I think when we think about asking, so often we go money, but we also say support. Oh, just support me. And I'm like, well, what does support look like? What specifically does support look like? Support looks like passing the mic to me at the next meeting because I know so-and-so is going to be in there and I want to start building a relationship with them and I want to make myself known. It could mean a myriad of things, but it is making it more concrete than this sort of nebulous, like and subscribe or, share and support, to something concrete that does actually move the needle.
So how do we, or what is a framework that or some of the frameworks that we can use to set up these different types of asks so it isn't the nebulous like and support side?
Yeah. I mean, look, I do want people to like and subscribe to this very podcast. That is a meaningful request. But, in so many of the communities I'm in, or when people think like, I just want people's support, I'm like, we got to take it another step further. So once we've articulated, we've identified an ask that we want to make that we think is going to get us more of one of those four things that we think will help getting us where we want to go, we have to actually set that ask up. And, because an ask is not a demand, we have to do our best at storytelling, practicing empathy, being able to do something I like to call understanding and being able to articulate the offer that is inside of the ask. I mean, I learned about this stuff from, the offer inside the ask from auctioneering, where I'm asking for people sometimes in a fundraising moment to just give a donation. They're not even buying something at auction. So what is my offer inside of that request for them to put their paddle in the air for $150, $25, $10,000? All the way down to a $50 contribution? Like, I need to make a case for what they get. So what is the offer inside the ask? And once you've identified that, I have two frameworks I really like to use. And I don't just use these for individuals thinking about asks that maybe advance an individual's career, but I use these. In fact, on Thursday, one of my founder clients is going to be using the second one I'm going to share with you to set up a request that she's making at an industry summit to all of what I'm going to think of as fellow travelers in her industry, so that they can have a collective impact on the thing they're trying to do in and around CPG. So from the individual to the collective, from the organizational to the industry, I like these two frameworks. The first one I want to call, and this is maybe more product focused, more engagement focused, I like to call the blocker buster, which it goes like this. You want to say out loud, be able to articulate what your audiences want. Maybe they want more influence. They want more margin. They want to experience growth in a very squeezed market. They want a reduction in complexity. They want faster customer acquisition. What is it that they want? And don't be impatient with describing it to them. Yes, they already know. That's not the point. The point of this moment in the blocker buster is to let them know that you know what they want. So that they see you get it, so to speak. Now, you might be articulating something a little bit differently than how they do, which should feel additive and a little bit like oh yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, not a correction of how they think about what they want. So that's the first step in the blocker buster. What do they want? A single sentence, a whole paragraph, 3 slides, in your product launch. I don't know what it'll take, but make that very clear. And then the second part is to go on to say, all right, but here's what's getting in the way of what you want. Here's what's blocking you from getting it. And make that very clear. Again, you might be introducing new insights. Sometimes I work with a lot of folks at some of the largest, I'm here in the Bay Area with some of the largest tech events. And those products that serve financial services, healthcare, others, every year when they're launching new features in their product, they've done a lot of research to understand what's going on in the industry. So you might be introducing new research that people in front of you don't realize that there's a blocker that they themselves don't see. And it could be very like quality types of blockers, like complexity or lack of engagement in their teams or other things. Or it could simply be a technology that's not working for them.
Mhm.
So we want to talk about what is getting in the way of what they want. And here's the buster part. And then the third bit is to share how what you're doing removes that blocker so they can get more of what they want. And then fourth beat is to make the ask that engages them in your offer, that helps remove that blocker, that gets them more of what they want. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the blocker buster. I'll do it again for folks who are listening and you want to pull over or
I'm taking notes.
stop your dog walk or whatever you're doing. So it's, here's what I see you want. Here's what's getting in the way and blocking you from getting it. Here's how my offer removes that blocker. And here's my asks so we can get moving should you want to engage in my offer. Yeah?
Yeah. I'll come back on. I was taking my notes over here of exactly what those 4 pieces are. And I'm going to be both of these. I'm going to try them out in videos after the conversation and I'll report back on how it does.
See what happens. Yeah. So there's that. That I really like, again, in and around, you're doing product pitches. Maybe you're an agency owner and you're out talking to clients. Maybe you're making project pitches. Maybe you're proposing a change in how we're approaching something from a technology perspective, from a talent perspective, how you're operating as a team, whatever. Okay. The other one is more useful, I think, for individuals who might be making a one-to-one ask. And this is one I like to call the mirror effect. And it has a similar quality, because we start with the person across the table. And it goes like this. The first beat is, I like to call, I see you, which is to say, I see you. I see what's important to you. I see what you're trying to do. I see the legacy you want to have. I see the impact you have had and want to continue to have. I see what you're all about. I see what you're striving for. It's your way of describing to them how you understand how they're showing up in the world and what they desire. And this should make somebody feel like in the blocker buster, you get them. They feel seen. So that's the first bit. I see you. And then the second bit is, you see me. And that is to say, you spend a minute talking about, here's what's important to me. Here's what I'm working on. Here's the legacy I want to leave behind. Here's what matters. Here are my core values. Here's what drives me. Here's what I'm trying to build. Here's the impact I'm trying to have. Whatever the thing is that helps reveal to the person across the table from you, virtually or otherwise, that starts to reveal how what they're up to and what you're up to might intersect. And then the third beat, unlike the blocker buster, this one has 3 beats, not 4. The third beat is, and because of that, here's my ask. So it could be that in that I see you and you see me, you're either just implying that there's some overlaps between what matters to both of you, what you're trying to do, or you're being actually very explicit to name and call out those intersections. But that becomes the setup for and the rationale for why you're making the ask that you're making now. I see you, you see me, and because of that, here's what I'm asking today.
So when we're making these asks and we are bringing them forward, how do we speak confidently in that leadership voice that you brought up at the beginning as we kind of navigate through these different frameworks?
Well, first we need to distinguish the difference. I'm preparing for a workshop tomorrow with a bunch of HR leaders, and I was just looking at this today and reminding myself, oh yeah, this is so true, that leadership voice is not necessarily a skillful voice. Meaning your leadership voice isn't about skills. It's about the content that you bring to the table. It's about the content of the voice, what your point of view is. It's about who you are. And then you can acquire skills. How do I exercise brevity? How do I become a better storyteller to bring that voice you have to life? So I think of them as separate. There's a really great quote. I think it's from Miles Davis. And he said, It takes a lifetime to sound like yourself, or it takes a really long time to sound like yourself. And what he's speaking to is it's not about how skillfully I play this instrument. It's how do I acquire enough skills and also develop my unique voice so that when I play the notes, they sound like mine, you know? So that's the distinction. A lot of my clients will come to me, senior executives, founders, mid-level folks will come to me and they want to they think they want skills. I want to learn how to be funnier. I need to be more charismatic. I need to have presence. I need to have whatever the thing is. They think it's skill acquisition. And I always have to go back to the question of yeah, but who are you and what are you all about? And often when we articulate that through a set of exercises, a framework I have, that itself will all of a sudden create more presence because they're present to their own ideas that they're bringing to the table. They have more conviction because they're really clear about what they stand for. And a bunch of this stuff that we would address with skill acquisition all of a sudden goes away. Because when you're saying something you actually mean, you know exactly where to put your hands. You know exactly where to give a dramatic pause.
I think that's and you and I were having a little bit of this conversation around the idea of confidence too, and how much confidence comes from clarity in your message and really understanding what you've prepped for and what you're asking for. And also some of it just comes from repetition and doing it and getting out there and doing the thing first.
Totally. And it is so true. Confidence is an outcome of two things, preparation and action. When I was a kid, I used to go to this lake in Northern California and they had a high dive at the lake, which is just what? I mean, it was just funky family camp, but for some reason there was a high dive there. And when I was young, I remember really distinctly being so scared to do it and not wanting to do it, not wanting to do it and not wanting to do it. And I ended up doing it. And then I felt confident and wanted to do it again, and it, builds on itself.
That's the perfect example of it. And we're going through that with our daughters right now.
Yeah.
We're back at the pool for the summer and we 100%. Have to regain confidence to do all of these things that they learned how to do last year. So going off the diving board for our youngest, putting her head underneath the water and all of those things. And I keep
do the prep. You do the preparation. Okay, when you do your pencil dive, where does your nose go? You run it, and that's the preparation that pays off in the action, which then produces the confidence to do it again. And then it's just a stair step,
Well, thank you so much for joining me for the conversation and for everybody for watching. If you're not already, make sure that you get connected with Dia on LinkedIn so that you can keep getting all of this wonderful content, and certainly reach out to either one of us if you've got any questions. But thank you again for your time and have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Leading Change. If you like what you saw, be sure to come back on a weekly basis and subscribe for more expert interviews focused on digital transformation, change management, and emerging technologies.